When the world assails you with insults, chaos, misunderstandings, or judgment, you're presented with two paths: to react or to rise. The majority choose to react, engaging in defense, explanation, or argument, yet a Stoic operates differently. They transcend this because true emotional strength isn't found in winning debates or proving your correctness, but in the absence of a need to do so. It's about remaining steadfast amidst the storm, calm, clear, and unshaken. This isn't due to escaping chaos, but rather due to becoming more resilient than it. In a world fueled by emotional triggers and digital outrage, there's a rare potency in restraint, in silence, in actively choosing your response rather than being dictated by your reaction. This episode delves into just that: becoming emotionally unshaken. Discover how to achieve emotional invulnerability, not through cold detachment, but through radical clarity. It's about mastering yourself so completely that no one else holds that power. These 12 Stoic principles will cultivate an inner stillness within you, even as the external world quakes. If you're prepared to stop surrendering your peace to those who haven't earned it, this is your starting point. 1. You cannot be triggered by what you no longer seek. Many believe anger stems from others' words or actions. However, the true kindling for our inner fire isn't the event itself, but our expectations. The ego doesn't rage because of rejection. It rages because, deep down, you hoped for acceptance. You sought attention, desired recognition, or craved control. When reality diverged from your wishes, emotion surged to protect your illusion. This isn't strength. It's emotional servitude veiled as reaction. The Stoic clearly perceives this. They don't merely suppress emotion. They dissect it. They look beyond the insult or provocation to unearth the genuine source of discomfort. Attachment not to people, but to outcomes. They grasp that pain doesn't enter through the world, but through their own unlocked door, a door left open by desiring something from someone incapable of giving it. Consider this. When did someone's silence last bother you? Now ask, was it their silence, or your need to be heard? When you were last rejected, did the pain arise from their action, or from your hope that they would stay? That subtle, unspoken, unconscious hope is what renders you emotionally fragile. It's not the world that breaks you, it's the craving you've wrapped around it. Here's the pivotal point. Once you cease seeking that thing, the same situations lose their power to wound. If validation is no longer a need, an insult becomes merely an opinion. If attention is no longer craved, being ignored transforms into peaceful silence. If you no longer expect someone to change, their behavior becomes a lesson, not a wound. That is the moment you become untouchable, not because you've hardened, but because you've relinquished the very needs that made you susceptible to breaking. Most live as emotional puppets, their strings manipulated by approval, likes, apologies, praise, or revenge. But the Stoic severs these strings one by one, not by hating others, but by reclaiming themselves. When you stop bartering pieces of your power for validation, you begin to navigate life with an unshakable presence, a presence rooted in self. You don't have to be indifferent, you just have to stop depending. You don't need to close your heart, only your expectations. Allow people to be as they are, let the world unfold as it will, and amidst it all, you remain still, not numb, but grounded. That's the distinction between reacting and responding. The former is a reflex of the wounded, the latter a skill of the free. So, here's your challenge. Honestly acknowledge what still holds power over your emotions. Is it your need for respect, love, to be heard, to be understood? Write it down, confront it. Then, envision yourself without that need. Who would you be? How would you enter a room if you no longer needed anyone's approval? How would you react to criticism if you didn't secretly desire praise? The moment you no longer seek it, it can no longer hurt you. That's how you become emotionally untouchable. You don't fight the triggers, you dissolve the craving. You disarm yourself not out of weakness but out of wisdom. What remains is silence, stillness, and power. 2. Every insult is an opinion, not a truth. There's a quiet strength in grasping this. The majority of what wounds you was never a fact. It was a statement, a gaze, a tone, a projection. Someone spoke from their own perspective, their own pain, their own limitations, and unknowingly, you adopted their opinion, wearing it like a name tag. But what if you had paused? What if you had questioned it before internalizing it? The Stoic doesn't accept every word as gospel. They scrutinize it like a scientist, asking, is this true? Does it align with who I know myself to be? Because genuine truth doesn't hurt, it liberates. If a comment wounds you, it's often because a part of you fears it might be accurate, or worse, a part of you has tethered your worth to that person's approval. Most people don't speak to reveal truth, they speak to defend their insecurities. They insult when they feel small, lash out when afraid, and judge to elevate themselves. The insult then is rarely about you, it's a mirror of them, their inner turmoil, not your value. But if you fail to see this clearly, you'll spend your life dancing to the rhythm of other people's wounds. Consider this, if someone called you a tree, would you be offended? Of course not. You know you're not a tree and you wouldn't give it a second thought. So why does it sting when someone calls you selfish, weak, or arrogant? Because, deep down, you're uncertain, or you're still striving to be perceived as the opposite. That uncertainty is what injects the insult with its poison. The Stoic principle here is simple yet transformative: separate fact from opinion, and treat all opinions, especially those steeped in anger, as data, not doctrine. You can observe them, even learn from them, but never submit to them. If someone calls you worthless, you can ask, is that true? Who defines my worth? Is it their voice or my values? Marcus Aurelius wrote, choose not to be harmed, and you won't feel harmed. Don't feel harmed, and you haven't been. This might sound overly simplistic or passive, but it's not about ignoring reality. It's about claiming authorship over it. You decide what enters your soul. You decide which arrows strike and which fall harmlessly at your feet. You don't become untouchable by erecting walls. You become untouchable by stripping false authority from your mind. You divest others of their imagined power to define you, and in doing so, you return to your own center, the place where only reason, virtue, and inner truth speak. So here's your task. The next time you feel the sting of someone's words, pause. Don't react. Ask, is this truth or opinion? Then remind yourself, an opinion, no matter its volume or cruelty, cannot define a reality I have already claimed. This is how you become emotionally untouchable, not by silencing the world, but by refusing to let its noise override your clarity. 3. You are only hurt when your ego is invested. Reflect on the last time you felt genuinely wounded by someone's words or actions. Was it because what they said was profoundly insightful, rooted in wisdom, or offered with care? Or was it because your pride, your identity, your image had something to lose in that moment? Most emotional pain isn't about what actually transpired. It's about what we attach to what happened. The Stoics grasped this long before modern psychology. We suffer not from the thing itself, but from the story we narrate to ourselves about it. If you identify too strongly with how people perceive you, every disagreement feels like a threat. If you bind your worth to being respected, admired, or liked, then any rejection feels like erasure. And if you rely on being seen as successful, competent, or virtuous, even a minor criticism can feel like a collapse. But who exactly is collapsing? It's not your character or your core, it's your ego. That fragile image you've constructed not for truth, but for comfort. To be clear, ego is not confidence. Confidence is quiet, ego is loud. Confidence is founded on evidence and values. Ego is inflated by praise and terrified of exposure. The Stoic doesn't combat ego with more ego. He dissolves it by stepping away from the illusion of image. He doesn't ask, how do they see me? But instead, am I living in alignment with what I value? Because the moment your sense of self hinges on others' perceptions, you've already surrendered your peace. This is why criticism feels unbearable when you still believe your identity is fragile. But what if you no longer needed to protect that identity? What if you knew that insults ricochet off truth like arrows off armor, not because you're cold or defensive, but because you've ceased viewing your ego as something worth safeguarding? That's where emotional invincibility begins. Seneca once wrote, "What need is there to weep over parts of life? The whole of it calls for tears." Yet even in that poetic sorrow, he taught that what we control is how we interpret pain. The Stoic path doesn't eliminate injury, but it strips injury of its power. If someone mocks you and you laugh, the insult perishes in your breath. But if someone mocks you and you tense, defend, and spiral, it was not their words that hurt you. It was your investment in the mask you were wearing. So, how do you begin to disinvest from ego? Start by observing where your sensitivity resides. Is it when you're ignored, challenged, or misunderstood? Wherever you feel that sting, look deeper. There's usually an underlying belief that your value depends on being perceived in a particular way. That belief is optional. And that belief, more than any insult, is what causes the pain. When you detach from the need to be seen as important, flawless, or always right, you unlock a kind of freedom most people never experience. You become someone who can navigate misunderstanding without explaining, rejection without shrinking, and offense without defending. This doesn't mean you're passive. It means you've stepped into a higher power, the kind that doesn't need to prove itself. And from that vantage point, you gain the ability to respond to the world with clarity, not reaction. To hear someone's judgment and say, maybe they're right, maybe they're wrong. Either way, I know who I am. That's not detachment in a cold sense. It's ownership of your internal world, the only world that truly belongs to you. So, if you want to stop being wounded by every careless word or every unfair moment, don't fight harder. Let go of the image. Let go of the armor. Let go of the exhausting need to be seen as perfect. Ego dies, and in its place, genuine peace is born. 4. The trigger is not them. It's your attachment. It's easy to believe that others are the cause of our lost calm. The rude stranger, the dismissive friend, the passive-aggressive partner, they all seem to wield the remote control to our emotions. But the Stoic understands the problem isn't the button, it's the wire we've permitted to remain connected. You cannot be triggered by something you've made peace with. You're only shaken when you're still attached to how things should be, not how they are. Most of what upsets us isn't novel, it's familiar. That tension you feel when someone ignores you isn't about them, it's about your attachment to being acknowledged. That sting when someone questions your choices isn't their words. It's your attachment to being right, to being respected. The discomfort, the frustration, the emotional spirals, they all trace back to one thing, a hidden grip we haven't yet released. We cling to expectations like invisible contracts. People should treat me this way. Life should go that way. I should be seen, understood, validated. And when reality violates those contracts, even silently, even unknowingly, we feel betrayed. But Stoicism isn't about altering people so they stop triggering us. It's about changing the parts of ourselves that get triggered in the first place. There's a significant difference between having a preference and being attached. A preference states I'd prefer if things went this way. An attachment declares I'll be unhappy unless they do. The Stoic lives with preferences but is ruled by none. They appreciate approval, kindness, and recognition, but they aren't anchored to them. When they're present, fine. When they're absent, they remain whole. Consider it this way. Your emotions are like alarms. If you feel rage, insecurity, jealousy, or fear, these aren't proof that the world is broken. They're proof that you still have some rewiring to do. And the great gift is that this work is internal. You don't have to wait for others to change. You just have to start noticing where you're holding on too tightly. This doesn't mean becoming numb. Stoicism isn't about becoming indifferent. It's about becoming independent. Independent of the roller coaster of external events. Independent of the validation chase. Independent of the myth that your peace belongs to anyone else. Let's make this practical. Start asking yourself this simple question every time something stirs you. What am I attached to right now? If someone cuts you off in traffic, are you attached to being respected on the road? If a friend forgets to reply, are you attached to being prioritized? If your work goes unnoticed, are you attached to recognition? In each instance, observe the internal narrative. They shouldn't do that. I deserve better. This isn't fair. These are the whispers of attachment. The Stoic doesn't fight them with force. They observe them, then release them. They understand that peace doesn't come from forcing the world into alignment. It comes from loosening the grip on expectations that never belonged to them. As Epictetus reminded us, it is not things themselves that disturb us, but our opinions about them. And it is our opinions that form our attachments, our belief that something is necessary for our happiness. That is the real trigger. So the next time someone says something that offends you, ask what part of you is still holding on. When you feel excluded, insulted, or forgotten, ask what wound this is touching. Awareness is the beginning of detachment. And detachment, not in the sense of coldness, but in the sense of liberation, is where your power returns. Because when you're no longer triggered by what others do, you reclaim full authorship of your inner world. And in that world, you write the rules. You choose the meanings. You set the tone. No one else. 5. Master your inner dialogue and you master your reactions. The most significant war isn't fought on battlefields or between nations. It's waged in the quiet of your own mind. And too often it's a war you don't even realize you're losing. You react to the world not based on what's happening, but based on the story you're telling yourself about it. That story, the quiet, constant voice in your head, is the true puppet master. Control it and the strings fall away. Leave it untamed and you'll forever be a slave to your own emotions. Imagine waking to a cloudy sky. The day hasn't even begun, but that inner voice already starts. Another miserable day. I can't deal with this. Everything goes wrong when the weather's bad. And just like that, your mind sets the tone for the day before anything even occurs. It's not the sky that made your day difficult. It's the interpretation you chose. That's the power and danger of your inner dialogue. Now picture a Stoic in the same situation. They see the clouds too, but their mind says something different. A gray sky is just that, a sky. I will not let a color decide my mood. I carry my own weather. This isn't forced optimism. It's trained perspective. It's the result of deliberate practice of sculpting thought until it serves, rather than sabotages. What you say to yourself, especially during moments of stress, pain, or conflict, determines how you show up. The person who cuts you off in traffic, you can tell yourself, they're out to get me. People are so disrespectful. Or you can say, maybe they're rushing to help someone. Either way, I refuse to give my peace to a stranger's actions. Same event, two reactions, dependent on one thing, your inner voice. The Stoics deeply understood this. Marcus Aurelius didn't just write meditations for the world. He wrote them to himself, daily reminders to guard his mind, correct his thoughts, and keep his power centered within. He knew that the way we speak to ourselves becomes the blueprint for how we experience reality. Ask yourself, is your inner dialogue a mentor or a bully? Does it encourage calm or fuel chaos? When something goes wrong, do you hear, "Of course, I always mess things up," or "This is hard, but I can respond with clarity"? These voices shape everything: your confidence, your patience, your ability to forgive, your strength under pressure. Change them, and your entire life changes. This doesn't mean pretending nothing affects you. It means narrating your life in a way that builds you rather than breaks you. A Stoic doesn't avoid difficulty, he reframes it. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" he asks, "What is this teaching me?" That simple shift transforms pain into wisdom, struggle into training, and chaos into clarity. But mastering your inner dialogue doesn't happen by chance. It's a discipline, a quiet, daily repetition of choosing better thoughts. You pause, you question the story, you replace it with something truer, calmer, more aligned with who you aspire to be. Over time, the voice that once attacked you becomes one that protects you. It becomes a refuge, not a battlefield. Try this in your next moment of irritation. Before reacting, listen to what you're saying inside. Then interrupt it. Say to yourself, I am not this emotion. I am not this thought. I can observe without obeying. That space between stimulus and response is where your power lives. Build it, strengthen it. Stand guard at the gates of your mind. Because once you master that space, the outside world loses its grip. The Stoic doesn't aim to eliminate emotion, but to prevent being ruled by it. And the path begins with language, not what's spoken, but what's thought. With time, your inner dialogue becomes not only your shield, but your sword, calm, clear, precise, and utterly untouchable. 6. You don't need to win. You need to remain centered. So many people enter conversations, challenges, and even relationships with an unconscious compulsion. I must win. Win the argument, win the attention, win the validation. But the Stoic doesn't engage in that game because he knows the real victory has nothing to do with dominating others and everything to do with not losing himself. The need to win is often just insecurity disguised as ambition. It's the fear of being perceived as weak. It's the craving to be admired, even if it costs you your peace. Let's be honest, most of what we contend about in life doesn't need to be won. It needs to be let go. And yet, we persist in trying to out-talk someone in a debate that won't matter in a week. We get ensnared in proving a point, correcting a misunderstanding, or being seen as right. But what if winning wasn't the objective? What if the goal was to walk away still aligned with your values, still calm, still focused? The individual who must win is the individual who can always be baited. They're emotionally susceptible to anyone who presses the right button. The moment someone challenges their ego, they abandon reason. But the Stoic doesn't flinch because they don't enter the ring. They don't need to display dominance. They don't seek to correct every opinion or control every perception. They simply ask, what response maintains my integrity? What action preserves my inner stillness? This isn't about being passive or allowing people to exploit you. It's about recognizing the difference between acting from purpose and reacting from pride. The Stoic sees the game and chooses not to play, not out of weakness, but out of wisdom, because staying centered, especially when provoked, is one of the highest forms of strength. Seneca once wrote, "A quarrel is quickly settled when deserted by one party." It's not cowardice, it's clarity. If someone insults you, misjudges you, or attempts to draw you into their chaos, your power lies in remaining anchored. Ask yourself, if I engage, do I gain peace or lose it? Because there are battles that build you and battles that drain you, and the wise person learns to discern the difference in today's world, where everyone desires the last word, the cleverest reply, or the viral comeback. Restraint is rare, but restraint is the root of control. It's what allows you to perceive the larger picture. You don't need to retaliate or correct every misperception. You need to guard your energy. Because when your focus is diverted into unnecessary conflicts, your mission is compromised. And the Stoic doesn't sacrifice their mission for momentary ego gratification. The next time someone challenges you, ask yourself, do I want to win this, or do I want to remain in command of myself? One will provide a short-term high, the other will grant long-term peace. One inflates the ego, the other which strengthens the soul. And that's the difference between playing to impress and living with purpose. Some people enter your life solely to test how easily you'll abandon your calm. Don't let them succeed. Smile if you must, step back if necessary, but always return to your center. The one who remains centered doesn't just avoid chaos, they transform it. They become the one others cannot manipulate, unsettle, or control. That is the Stoic victory. Not dominance, but discipline. Not reaction, but reason. When you stop needing to win, you become the one who cannot be defeated, because your power no longer depends on applause, agreement, or outcome. It flows from within, untouched by the noise. 7. Silence is your sword. Use it wisely. There exists a rare kind of strength that neither shouts, argues, nor chases. It simply observes in silence. Most people underestimate the force of silence because they are too accustomed to noise. They believe power is expressed through volume, speed, and reaction. But the Stoic knows that the person who masters silence masters influence, because they become unpredictable, unmoved, and unreadable. Silence, in the right hands, becomes a sword not for attack, but for precision and restraint. When you choose silence in a world addicted to over-explaining, you reclaim something sacred: control. You refuse to be drawn into chaos simply because someone else has lost control of their own emotions. You don't speak to defend your worth. You don't react to every insult. You don't clarify for those committed to misunderstanding you. You simply are. And that presence, untouched by noise, speaks louder than any words ever could. Silence doesn't signify weakness. It means you've evolved beyond the need to participate in every conflict. It means you've realized that some words cannot be unsaid, and some battles are won by not showing up at all. When someone attempts to provoke you and you offer stillness instead of reaction, you disarm them completely. They anticipate fire. You provide still water, and in that stillness they see their own reflection, not yours. It demands far greater strength to remain silent than to lash out. Anyone can explode, anyone can argue, but it requires deep discipline to pause, to breathe, and to let the moment pass without becoming it. The Stoic trains themselves in this pause because they know it's where wisdom resides. In silence, you can hear your own thoughts clearly. In silence, you can discern your true motives before acting. And in silence, you can see through the noise of others and realize what genuinely deserves your energy. Think of how many conflicts could have been averted if someone had simply paused. Think of how many regrets were born from words spoken to her hastily. The Stoic doesn't aim to be silent perpetually. They simply choose to speak with purpose, not reaction. Their silence is intentional. It's a space where they realign with reason before responding, and when they finally do speak, their words land with weight because they're not scattered, they're sharpened. The world today is loud. Social media rewards outrage. News cycles thrive on division. Conversations are often competitions. But amidst all that, silence becomes rebellion. It becomes protection. It becomes elegance. When you can walk away from gossip, when you can resist the urge to correct every misperception, when you can sit in silence while others unravel, that's when we've achieved a level of mastery that's untouchable. There's power in knowing that you don't owe the world your energy. You don't need to argue to prove you're right. You don't need to defend your boundaries to those who never respected them in the first place. Your silence is your shield. It filters out what doesn't matter and preserves what does. Your peace, your focus, your purpose. So the next time you feel triggered, tempted, or provoked, pause. Remember the sword you carry. Remember that silence is not retreat, it's strategy. And in that strategy, you don't just survive the moment. You elevate. Above it, the Stoic doesn't just speak less. He speaks only when necessary. And that makes his presence unforgettable. Because while others waste their breath trying to be heard, he becomes the one they listen to, even in his silence. 8. Not everything deserves a response. One of the most liberating truths you will ever embrace is that you are not obligated to attend every argument to which you are invited. You don't owe the world a reaction. You don't need to prove your viewpoint in every conversation. You don't have to respond to every provocation, criticism, or request for your attention. In fact, the more intentional you become, the more you realize this. Your energy is currency, and not everything is worth a price. The Stoic understands that reacting to everything is a form of slavery. If every comment pulls you in, every insult that drags you down, and every conflict ropes you into an emotional tug-of-war, then you've surrendered your peace to the external. You've made your internal weather dependent on someone else's forecast. But when you begin to choose where your energy goes, a quiet kind of power emerges, a power rooted in choice, not compulsion. You do not need to have the last word. You don't need to convince them you're right. You don't even need to be understood by those who are committed to misunderstanding you. What you need is clarity on what matters and what doesn't. And the truth is, most of what comes your way is just noise disguised as urgency. A rude driver, a passive-aggressive text, a social media comment designed to provoke. None of it deserves your sacred attention. Responding is not always a strength. Sometimes it's a distraction. Every moment spent in unnecessary conflict is a moment stolen from your purpose, your creativity, your presence. And if you don't guard your energy with care, the world will consume it without apology. There's a line in Stoic thought that reminds us if someone does wrong, that is their problem, not yours. You are not the repairman of every broken person. You are not the defender of your name against every whisper. You are not responsible for fixing the world's perception of you. Your task is much simpler and much more powerful: to live with integrity, to act from wisdom, and to stay aligned with your values. Everything else is noise. And that's the shift. Realizing that silence is not a weakness, it's a decision. It's an act of self-respect. You don't respond because you're afraid. You don't respond because you've already decided that your time and energy are too valuable to be spent on the irrelevant. This isn't about detachment in a cold or uncaring way. It's about discernment. It's about knowing that not all things are worth your breath, that your peace is a priority, and that your mission in life requires focus. And not every reaction aligns with that mission. So the next time someone says something offensive, pause. Ask yourself, is this worth my energy? Will this move me forward? Will this strengthen my character? Or is this just noise bait on a hook that leads nowhere? And if the answer is no, walk away. Not with bitterness, but with calm clarity. Because your silence is not defeat. It's a statement. It's you saying, I am not moved by pettiness. I am not pulled by distraction. I know who I am, and I am building something far too important to be delayed by what doesn't matter. The Stoic doesn't chase applause. He doesn't react to every shout. He walks his path with focus, and that focus makes him unshakable. 9. Offense is taken. Not given. We live in a world where taking offense has become almost a reflex, nearly a badge of honor. But the truth is, offense isn't something injected into you by someone else. It is something accepted, absorbed, and amplified within. The Stoics taught that between stimulus and response lies a space. In that space, you decide, will this shake me or will I remain still? And in that decision lies your freedom. Consider it. How often do people unintentionally offend you? A casual joke, a comment that touches an old wound, a look you interpreted through the lens of insecurity. It wasn't their words that harmed you, it was the meaning you assigned to them. Meaning resides within you, and when you train yourself to pause before assigning meaning, you begin to reclaim control over your emotional life. This isn't about being numb, it's about being wise. There's a distinction between being oblivious to harm and choosing not to. Let every slight dictate your mood. You don't have to navigate life with a constant shield, always on guard. But you must navigate with awareness, aware that most of the offense you feel isn't about the world's intention, but your internal interpretation. A Stoic mind doesn't absorb every energy around it. It filters, it evaluates, it asks, does this deserve to enter my inner sanctuary? Because the truth is, offense is often a trap. It invites you into conflict, into drama, into proving your value through reaction. And every time you take that bait, you diminish yourself. You allow someone else's ignorance to dictate your inner world. But when you see through the illusion, you begin to unlock emotional invincibility. You understand that the only insults that sting are the ones you believe. If someone called you a failure and you knew deep in your being that you were growing, learning, and evolving, would their words land, or would they pass through like wind through an open window? Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Choose not to be harmed, and you won't feel harmed. Don't feel harmed, and you haven't been." It's not denial, it's dominion. It's knowing that your dignity doesn't hinge on someone else's words. It's rooted in your character. Your clarity. There is profound strength in being unoffendable, not because you're indifferent, but because you've mastered perspective. You've chosen to no longer let your peace be hijacked by careless remarks, by online comments, by strangers who don't even know your heart. So the next time someone tries to provoke you, remember this: their words are like arrows shot into the ocean. They can't hurt you unless you wade into their shallow waters and hand them your power. And why would you do that when you've worked so hard to build your peace? Your reaction is your choice. Your inner world is your responsibility. Offense is taken, not given. In today, you have the choice to embrace only that which serves your growth. 10. You are not what happens, you are how you respond. There is a fleeting, imperceptible instant between life's challenges and your reaction. To them, this is the realm of your freedom. Events will unfold, people will disappoint you, life will present hardships, yet the Stoic doesn't view these occurrences as personal affronts. Instead, they see them as raw material, as unrefined clay offered by the universe to be molded into virtue or bitterness. The event itself doesn't define you. Your response does. Consider this: if you allow a breakup, a betrayal, or a job loss to define you, your identity becomes reactive rather than intentional. You become a reflection of circumstances instead of a sculptor of character. But what if you shifted your perspective? What if you began to perceive every event, even the painful ones, as an opportunity to reveal your true self? That's the Stoic transformation from reaction to authorship. Your power doesn't reside in controlling what enters your life. That's an illusion. It lies in deciding how you will meet it. You can confront disrespect with silence. You can confront failure with discipline. You can confront loss with courage. In doing so, you transcend the event and become greater than it. Life isn't personal, it's a proving ground. Seneca observed. A gem cannot be polished without friction, nor a man perfected without trials. Every challenge carries a question. Will you shatter or will you build? If you consistently choose the latter, something remarkable occurs. You cease to fear chaos. You no longer demand an effortless path. You begin to trust that no matter what transpires, you will respond in alignment with the person you've chosen. To be this isn't about suppressing emotion or pretending everything is fine. It's about returning to your center. The Stoic experiences profound emotions but doesn't permit feelings to dictate their actions. They acknowledge anger but don't lash out. They confront grief but don't collapse. They allow the storm to pass through them without becoming the storm. That is strength. That is sovereignty. It's tempting to declare, I am this way because of what happened to me. But the Stoic reverses the narrative. I became who I am because of how I responded. That is where transformation resides, in the choice not to surrender your identity to random events. So ask yourself today, in whatever you face, will I mirror this chaos or will I unveil my character? Will I imitate the disorder or will I model the mindset I claim to value? You are not your past. You are not your pain. You are not what they did. You are the space in between, the still point where your power awaits, asking only, how will you respond? 11. Let them misunderstand. You let them talk. There comes a point when silence speaks more powerfully than any defense. When you reach a stage in life where peace matters more than proving yourself, you begin to recognize just how much energy you've squandered trying to correct misconceptions. The Stoic doesn't demand the world to be accurate about them. They don't rush to rectify every misunderstanding or clarify every judgment. They simply exist and allow the truth of their character to rise above the din. This isn't a sign of weakness. It's a display of strength, the kind of strength that no longer thrives on validation, no longer recoils at gossip, and no longer yearns to be seen in a particular light. Because here's the reality. If someone is determined to misunderstand you, no amount of explanation will alter their perspective. They don't see you. They see the story they've chosen to tell themselves. And if that narrative makes them feel more powerful, superior, or comfortable, they will cling to it regardless of what you say. But when you detach from that, when you genuinely let go of the need to be understood, you step into emotional sovereignty. You no longer perform for approval. You no longer explain your silence, your standards, your growth. You don't pursue closure. You are the closure. You become so firmly rooted in who you are and what you embody that other people's opinions begin to sound like background static, present, but powerless. Marcus Aurelius famously wrote, "Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. Be one." That's the transition from explanation to embodiment, from defending to demonstrating. The Stoic understands that their life is their message, not their words, not their rebuttals, but their very existence. People will always talk. That's what people do. But the less you react, the louder your actions become. When you remain calm in the face of criticism, you exhibit maturity. When you persist in building despite being doubted, you demonstrate resilience. And when you ascend without needing revenge, that is true power. Let them misunderstand you. Let them diminish you, mock you, twist your intentions. Their noise reveals them, not you. Your silence reveals your growth. It communicates, I no longer need to be seen as right. I just need to be right with myself. And in the end, that's what freedom feels like. When your peace no longer depends on their comprehension and your value no longer hinges on their perception, you become unshakable, not because they changed, but because you did. 12. Emotional freedom begins with radical responsibility. There's a moment, and it's not easily attained, when you finally cease looking outward for someone to blame. Not because you were wronged any less, not because life became fairer, but because you grasp a deeper truth. Regardless of who hurt you, regardless of what they said or failed to do, your healing, your peace, your emotional sovereignty is your responsibility. No one is coming to rescue you, and that isn't tragic. It's liberating. The Stoic path commences where blame ends, because the longer you point the finger, the more you remain entangled in the very pain you wish to escape. When you say, "They made me angry," you've handed them the keys to your nervous system. When you say, "They ruined my day," you've made them the author of your emotional life. But emotional freedom means reclaiming that authorship, one choice, one reaction at a time. This isn't about denial. The Stoic doesn't pretend pain didn't happen. They simply refuse to be defined by it. You were betrayed. Feel it, but don't become bitterness. You were judged. Accept it, but don't live under their narrative. You were left. Mourn it, but rise and keep rising until your story no longer revolves around their absence. Radical responsibility means this. Everything that enters your mind, every thought you entertain, every feeling you act upon is yours to manage. You can't control what others throw at you, but you can control what you hold on to, and that is not a burden. It's the most powerful form of freedom you'll ever experience. Seneca penned, "A gem cannot be polished without friction, nor a man perfected without trials." That friction, those daily provocations, insults, losses, they're not merely annoyances. They are the forge. They test your capacity to pause before reacting. They challenge you to grow, not because life is easy, but because you've chosen to become someone who transcends chaos. That's so the next time you're triggered, pause. Ask yourself, what is this reaction teaching me about me? That question alone is a revolution. It transforms blame into awareness. It replaces helplessness with power, and over time it rewires your entire nervous system toward clarity, resilience, and presence. Emotional untouchability isn't about suppression. It's about conscious mastery. It's about being able to feel everything without being ruled by anything. And that always begins with ownership, complete, radical, unapologetic ownership of your inner world. You are not fragile. You are not at the mercy of others. You are not here to react endlessly to a world that never requested your peace. You are here to build it anyway, from the inside out. You don't become emotionally untouchable by constructing walls. You become untouchable by becoming deeply rooted, by knowing precisely who you are, what you stand for, and what no longer deserves your energy. The Stoic doesn't seek to escape emotion. He seeks to master it. And mastery doesn't imply control in a rigid sense. It means harmony, presence, the ability to feel fully without being pulled under. In a world that constantly tests your patience, your worth, your identity, your power lies in this. You do not owe the world a reaction. You owe yourself alignment. You owe yourself peace. And when you choose that peace repeatedly in the face of criticism, rejection, or misunderstanding, you don't merely protect your energy. You evolve quietly, deeply, permanently. So, embrace these Stoic truths and wear them like armor, not to close yourself off, but to open yourself more wisely. Speak less, but mean more. Expect less, but give more intentionally. Seek less noise, but cultivate more clarity. And most importantly, remember, your emotional life is yours, not theirs. Not anyone else's to distort or dictate. If this message that resonated with you, if it reminded you of your strength, your responsibility, your potential, I invite you to take a moment right now, not just to reflect, but to share this message with someone who needs it. Subscribe for more Rise Stoicism, comment with the principle that spoke to you most, and keep walking this path. Because the strongest version of you isn't loud, reactive, or desperate, but centered, wise, and absolutely unshakable. Thank you for watching the video. Please subscribe, like, and share this video. Don't forget to hit the bell icon button.